Hey everyone, it's Val and Lisa, and we are here today to do Cat's Cradle round of our Meet Me in the Garden quilt along.
Yes, and this is a fun one. The Cat's Cradle is this round right here. I'll stand up. It's right here. And when we make a Cat's Cradle block for this quilt, we're actually sewing 4 of the Cat's Cradle units together with a little inner border to make it an 8-inch finished square. So we're going to talk about how to make those Cat's Cradle blocks. And you can see there's half square triangles and little setting triangles in here. But the great thing about this ruler is we do not cut any triangles. It's so
I find
exciting.
that fascinating.
Yeah, I'm like, whoever thought of this ruler was brilliant. So we need the, not the extra large size. This is the Cat's Cradle. It's not called small, but it does do 6 different sizes. Again, it will do a 1.5-inch finished block all the way up to a 4-inch finished block. So we're going to be using the 3.5-inch finished block just from using this tool. We have to cut our pieces different, but
1.5 Cat's Cradle.
yeah, you could do teeny tiny.
So this whole unit is 1.5?
Yes.
Woohoo, I love it.
It's little. It's little. All right. So again, on your Cat's Cradle ruler, it tells you, we go to what size we're making, and it tells you need 2 pieces of this measurement, 2 pieces of this measurement, and 1 of that, okay, of this size. I don't think I mentioned it when we did the 8-inch square on square, or maybe I did. If for some reason you ever lose your instructions, because I don't ever like to throw these away because this is my guide on how to use the tool if I don't want to watch a video or whatever, okay? If you lose these, take a picture of that with your camera on your phone, and it'll take you to the website for the tutorial, and your instructions from Creative Grids are on there too.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So if you lose them, they're on their website, and it takes you to Creative Grids, and then it shows you, and I think there's a video of, I think this one's Deb Heatherly. This is her ruler, so I think it's her video. I watched it a long time ago, so I can't remember. There's lots of great videos.
So find yourself a file folder and put all your...
I bought a little half binder with little just sleeve protectors, and this goes in there. And so then it's organized, and I can put a little tab that tells me so I'm not having to look.
Or you could get like a binder with page protectors and put your ruler and your instructions in
yes,
too.
if your ruler fits in that 8.5.
And most of these do, aren't there? About
Yeah,
that
I think
size,
I think our square on square might not.
Okay.
It's a little bit bigger, but you could put that in a pocket. Okay. Yep. All right. So don't lose your instructions, or if you do, that's where they are.
I think those are QR codes,
yes,
right?
Yep. The QR reader. You can use a QR reader or your camera.
Just use your camera.
So on this, it's told us that we needed 2 pieces. I'm going to go this way because that's how it is. 2 pieces, the squares, 2 rectangles, 2 small rectangles, and 1 large rectangle. Okay, so see, no triangles. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew our squares to our small rectangles. We're just going to use a 1/4-inch seam, and we're going to go down the side. What happened?
I'm going to put my 1/4-inch foot on.
Oh, going to switch your foot. Okay.
Keep talking.
So we're going to sew these units, okay, 1/4-inch seam. We're going to press towards the rectangle. After we press, we want our square to stay flat. And the other thing I want to mention is that these 5 pieces of fabric that we're using here make 2 Cat's Cradle units, okay? So we need our amount, so whatever our amount was, we divided that in half, and that's how many sets we need to make. So our Cat's Cradle row is going to be made with this particular ruler.
So you want me to sew these 2?
1/4-inch.
Okay.
Yep, you can sew. I have one sewn here as a demo, and then after they are sewn, we sew the rectangles together. with the squares in the opposite corner. So after Lisa does that, I probably will press
So
one.
when you're making a whole bunch of blocks, would
Yep.
you just chain?
We chain, and so I sew all my squares to all my rectangles, and then I make sets or pairs where I make this little unit right here. All right, so the one thing I'm going to do real quick is show you how we press these when, can I have your scissors please? So after our rectangles are sewn together, we have to put a little snip, and this is just to help this lay flat when we press, and then we're going to mark. So I have folded it in half, and right now I have I'm going to lay it here so maybe we can get a close-up. I have the fold here, and I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to snip right up to the seam allowance, not through it. Ooh, I got lucky. I didn't go through it. I was cutting far away from myself.
Yeah.
All right, so it is split right there. And what that's going to do is that's going to help us when we go to press this. We want our squares to remain flat. Okay, can everybody see how that's nice and flat? And it's flat there. Okay, so we're going to give that a press. So it's splitting your seams. You know, sometimes we do that for 4 patches or pinwheels or whatever. Okay, so now once this is pressed flat, we're going to now use the marking side. Do you have the red pen? Okay, the marking side of the tool. So if you see on the ruler right here, it says place on seam line. And this doesn't matter what size cat's cradle you're doing. This is the seam line marking that we use. The other thing I like about this is this has some grip to it.
Yes.
So when I put this down, because we're going to have to mark this, it's not going to scoot around.
Yes.
So I'm going to stand up so I can make sure I'm looking
Creative
at
Grid
this.
has that
I love that.
gripper.
They're my favorite
gripper edge.
rulers.
Yep, they are
So
mine too.
I am
Well
going
worth
to,
the little more money to
Yeah.
have that on there.
and remember, we're going to have coordinating quilts or quilts that are going to use these rulers.
Yeah, so-
Lisa and I were talking, we might
Yeah.
do a book, we might do patterns, we're not sure, but we're going to have lots of ways to use these rulers.
So what she means is we're going to have another different quilt that uses the
Yes, 'cause
Cat's
you don't
Cradle
want-
units.
For me as a teacher, I don't want to show somebody a ruler that they can only ever use once.
Or for one thing, yeah.
For only one thing,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
I mean, especially...
I mean, yeah, because the Cat's Cradle unit is very popular. There's
It
lots
is.
of things you
It
can
is.
make.
And
with
we
it.
don't always know that it's called Cat's Cradle
Right,
Lock
true,
either.
true.
Okay, so I have the seam line is underneath this black line on the ruler. And then right here on the edge, it says mark sewing line. And again, this is okay to use a friction pen or a permanent marker, a micron. You just don't want it so thick that it's going to bleed through your fabric because this is a sew line, okay? So I've marked one side. And one thing that I really paid attention to is when I drew that line, that it's right there at the intersection. And unfortunately, we have a little fold. Maybe I'll mark another one.
It happens.
Yeah. Is right at the intersection so that when we sew, we're going to get a nice sharp point on that square, okay? And we're going to spin that around. And then there's my seam line. And then I'm going to place the ruler right on top of the seam line. And I, again, am going to mark.
And we used a red pen for the video. You don't have to use
Yeah.
red. You can use
Use the lightest, darkest pen you can see.
get
Yep.
away with. Yep.
Yep. All right, so we would sew all of our rectangle sets together. We would mark all of our rectangle sets. And then when I put my my fabrics together with this, I'm making sure that my 3 colors, my darks, aren't the same, just so it just is a little bit more scrappy. I think
And this is okay that this is orange and orange because they're different oranges.
it is,
Yep.
but I could switch
it to a green
Yeah, I
or
could
red,
go.
yeah.
I'm gonna go green just so we have a good contrast. So now this flips over, and one thing I wanted to point out is it doesn't matter if one time your squares are sewn, your rectangle units are sewn together like this, or if they're sewn together like this, okay? It does not matter, okay? That's not going to matter in the end because we're cutting this and trimming everything down. So it's not a right or a wrong. So if you accidentally, you can see what I'm talking about. Hopefully they're opposites. You turn it and you sew it differently. It's not going to hurt anything as long as they're
symmetrical units.
Yes, it makes symmetrical units. Yep. Okay, so no worries there. Okay, so now we've nested or put those two together. Lisa's going to sew on those lines for me. And that's one of the fun things about making this unit this way is we are sewing on a line. So when we trim it, we're making sure our triangles are the perfect size they're supposed to be. I don't even know what that perfect size is because I don't have to know that with this trim tool. I just know that my unit is going to measure 3.5 inches when I'm done in the quilt.
And if I was sewing a bunch of these, I probably would have took off my 1/4 inch foot, but
yes, because you want to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So if you have a little flange on the edge of your foot, you might just want your regular foot because all we're doing is sewing on the line. Now, in the pattern instructions, and I don't know if this works for all different sizes, but on this one, they tell you to line up the 1/4 inch line and cut. Okay, and I'm going to do it. And then they have you come over here and line that up and cut. And if you notice, all I have is that little 1/8 inch sliver left over. This is seam allowance that it's in there where the quilt police aren't going to see it. So when I did mine, I just cut it in half. I laid that in the middle and I cut it down the center. It doesn't matter if your seam allowance
is
does not matter if you leave that extra 1/16 of an inch on either one of these sides. Okay, it's not going to hurt anything to do that.
It's just one less cut in all those units.
Yeah, do you want to sew one more so I can show a couple more trimming?
I like sewing.
All right, I'm going to press mine. So I set my seams and then I press to the dark triangle. And then each one of these ends up with a unit that looks like that. And then they're too big, so we're going to trim everything down to size. So I'll let Lisa finish sewing that one and we'll cut one more so that we can demo that. Okay, again, I just lined this up in the center and cut. One cut, not two.
Yeah.
Okay, saves you a little bit of time. All right, let me press these.
And I'm perfectly fine with that little smidge of float there if it misses us a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Because once that's washed and quilted, it'll all sink in. Yeah.
Makes it look homemade.
Yeah.
All right. So on this ruler now, we need to know our finished size. So our finished size is 3.5. That's the measurement that we're looking at. So on here, there's 1.5 all the way up to 4-inch squares. So we're going to use the 3.5-inch line, the marking line, and we're going to line that up to the sewn seam of that square. Okay. The other thing that we're lining up is this diagonal line. So sometimes we got to zhuzh it a little.
I never heard that word before.
No? Zhuzh. Zhuzh.
Is that a Michigan thing or is that a Vegas thing?
It was a funny show I used to watch on, like, I don't know.
Have you ever heard of zhuzh?
Zhuzh. I'm going to say, I think it came from this show, and I could be wrong, but it was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, and it was like, he's like, we got to zhuzh that a little bit.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. But I don't know where he was from when he was saying it.
I'm going to have to use that.
Zhuzh it, yeah. All right, so I'm lined up on, I keep moving it. Lined up on the diagonal, and I'm lined up in that square. So again, I cut up and across the top. Okay, and if I were, I'm just going to do another one real quick. If I were doing this at home, I'd line the second one, the next one up, line up my square
It's perfect.
and my diagonal. Woo.
No zhuzhing.
Cut, no zhuzhing, and up across the top. All right, so now when we need to trim this side, we spin that around. We keep this the ruler oriented the same, and what we're lining up is the 3.5-inch diagonal line, and this diagonal line needs to come out to the point of the little square. Okay, so that is cutting.
I was a little nervous about those little
Yeah, but
things.
look how they line
cuts
up,
them
just
right off.
perfect.
Yeah,
They're
perfect.
right at the edge of the triangle. So that is one of our units. We turn that around. We leave the ruler oriented the same. So I'm lined up on that diagonal and the 3.5-inch dash line. All right, and we would do that to all of our units. And then once everything is done, we sew them together in sets of 4, and I'm going to pull one of these out so you can see what they look like. So we use the 1.5-inch squares and the 1.5 by 4-inch rectangles, and we do that as a sashed block.
And make sure you scrap it all up good.
Scrap it all up. But yep, I got 2 reds, but they're different reds.
Right, and it's okay that you get the same print.
You know,
that's okay.
if we end up with all greens in the corner, then maybe you want to switch it out a little bit. But at some point, it's just going to have to be scrappy. And it might touch, just like those darn pinks right over there.
Did you show them your pinks?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't know if I did on this video, but on another one. But right here. I got 2 touching.
bad.
So random. And they just ended up together.
And if you didn't point it out, we would have never noticed.
Yes. All right. And then the other thing that you're going to do on this unit, and I thought I had some here. I do. So we're making all of our blocks. We make the amount of blocks that we need, okay, individual. Then we make all of these blocks. And then if you want to start sewing your rows together, you're going to have separate sets of the 1.5 by 4 and the 1.5-inch square. And it just is a separator. When I designed the original quilt, I had an extra block in each row. And what I didn't like about that were all these places where things were pressed the exact same way and they did not intersect. Okay, so my seams didn't nest right.
Well, that was genius to put
right.
those in.
So I'm like, we're doing that.
Too,
yeah, it's like gives us a little spacer and adds a little bit more small pieces in there. And remember, this quilt has almost 3,000 pieces in it. So exciting.
The more the better.
Yep. So on your instructions that you'll get for this month for the Cat's Cradle round, it will tell you how to make the top and bottom sides of the quilt, and it'll tell you how to make, or the top and the bottom and the sides. And you can get those panels sewn together ahead of time so that when our middle part of our medallion is done, it's going to be so easy just to put together.
So this is one of the very first blocks that we're going to be making, or second?
It's our second, yeah. Okay. So we have a...
So you decided to start from the outside in where there's more blocks. So
it's reverse psychology, right? Yes. Because what we usually do is we start with the center, and the center is the smallest amount of blocks. We only need 16 log cabin blocks. When we get out to the square on square, we need the most blocks. We need 48 blocks out there. And that one also happens to have the most steps, okay? So, because there's so many rounds around it. So my theory was we're going to start with the biggest and work our way in, because if you're like me, I get to the end of something and I go, oh, I just...
You peter out a little bit.
Yeah, maybe I won't add that last border, okay? Yeah. That might be what I think. So, just, because we have so many other things to move on to.
Yep.
Okay, so that is our Cat's Cradle round for our Meet Me in the Garden stitch along. And again, if you have questions, please make sure you type them in on the comment section or in Stitch with Lisa on Facebook.
Yeah, and if you're making this and you want anybody else to know about it, share it with your friends. I'm sure that we can find fabric somehow or another.
Yep.
It's scrappy.
It's a good scrap buster
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So
And it's okay to put some of your own fabric in here as well, because then your quilt will have no other fabric that anybody else does.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So even if you make a mistake cutting something, it's okay. I mean, as long as they have that same overall tone, I think
Yep,
everything would just...
everything. Yeah, I made a different medallion quilt, and I made one in a little bit brighter fabrics, and then I made
more reproduction.
I actually did I was in Lisa's Fat Eighth Club since I think 2010. I don't know. I had a ton. It was probably 2013. I had a ton of Fat Eights, and I still do. But I did a reproduction version. Not
Using
this,
all those,
not
yes.
this, but it's a great way to use those up and just use what you have. But this is great too.
So that's a wrap for the Cat's Cradle block for Meet Me in the Garden.